All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for
Oregairu, Season 1, Episode 4. We
All
got
right.
introduced to Sai last episode.
Yeah, Sai, our nervous tennis boy. He seems to be the one who will be kind of the final piece to round out the cast, if you will. I could see them maybe adding one more, but even numbers do seem to have a little bit more, like, you know,
bad luck.
Potential for things going into like factions and stuff.
Right, and we do already have another faction with the popular kids, the Clique, right? And they played tennis against them, and it was great. Some fun competition there, some crazy tactics that were used. Victory was achieved. Awesome.
Yeah.
And we even got a traditional rom-com bit at the very end to balance things out.
Yes, absolutely. We got Hachiman getting hit in the face by a random object to
deflect from the view that he got for a split second.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Thank you, rom-com gods. Or wait, yes.
Step in the right direction.
You are a thing, rom-com gods.
Right.
Admit your existence. But given that these characters are now all starting to form their own unique kind of connections with Hachiman, and that is kind of now something that we're establishing, is that he is, like, through and through, not only the main character, but it's his interactions with each of the characters that are kind of the main focus in general.
Yeah.
Because we get so much... I mean, an overwhelming amount of time inside his head, getting to know how he feels not only about these connections, but about how they relate to
him as a person. And
right, but to his experience with the social hierarchy theory worldview that he has built up so far, that is starting to have a little bit of a crumbling, or of a reimagining, or of a restructuring.
And maybe, you know, as that starts to reform, we'll get to see some of his backstory bits that have been hinted at, like the whole bike accident and that situation.
Yeah. But yeah, season 1 is also like one cour, so that means this will be 1/3 essentially of the first season, which means if they want to do any more introductory stuff, this is about
would be
the last
time to do it.
to do that kind of stuff on the typical sense. But this show is anything but typical thus far.
Yeah.
So, y'all, without further ado, let's get into this. All right, everyone, now be sure to go check out the reaction portion of the video in the description below, then come back here for the discussion. All right.
Okay.
We got ourselves a good episode focused on Hayama Hayato.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that, you know, he's being sort of upgraded, like, as far as his main characterness status, you know, or side character status.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea of, since this show is about the sort of social hierarchies and cliques and things like that, and just the general dynamic of navigating these waters with these new adults, right? These people going through adolescence, that makes sense. That's an important part of the story. So having people that aren't just from our MC's regular sphere of influence makes a lot of sense, right?
His sphere of influence.
Exactly.
Non-existent. But that's actually, I'd say, kind of the point, is that it's growing quite rapidly. Is that that's going to be something that he maybe doesn't necessarily realize how big it's getting so quickly, because the words he has within like one episode were already having a strong effect on Yui, and over time they seem to be having a little bit of an effect on Yukino. Not that strong, because she has
has her own way of doing things,
right? But she also has a very like closed kind of
armor up.
Exactly. She's very guarded in that respect. But then we saw his past with Zamakuza. Now we're seeing kind of a little bit of a future potential friendship with Sai, who is very intentional about being like, hey, I want to spend time with you. I want to get closer to you. I want to get to know you.
And he's like, I don't have any guy friends. Yeah. You know.
Right. Yeah. Who do you think Sai is then? Like,
okay.
What do you think's going on here?
All right. Okay.
So that's kind of its own potential source of pain and or really
conflict
good connection if it ends up going that way eventually.
Sure. Yeah.
But then, okay, so Hayato or Hayama Hayato, he has basically the charisma. That is his strength. He is the popular boy in the school. And in some ways, we got to see a little bit of a unique kind of dynamic here within the whole school as a not the school, the class specifically.
Yes.
In that the other girl who was kind of the mean girl, popular girl, she kind of was like, oh, I'm going to follow him around to the place where he's going at the end of the episode. And then also his friend group was one where they were all friends with him, but not really friends with each other. So once he was removed from the situation,
the social magnet's gone.
Yeah, they were able to then have, the opportunity to choose whatever group they wanted to go into, but then also be like, well, maybe we could try being a group together. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Yeah. I want to know your thoughts on this, Jacob, because I feel like we've each had very unique experiences with the idea of very charismatic, extroverted, like really confident people that walk into situations and they just own the whole room. It's really, really impressive and terrifying at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's not at all intimidating. I feel like my interactions and experiences with things like that are fairly limited because I kind of voted myself off the island when I was really young because of certain things that happened, because I confided things with people and I thought that it was like, oh yeah, it's just normal to have someone's back sort of in those social dynamics. But then it's like, no, they don't actually. Like not really. I mean, when it's convenient, sure, but when it's convenient to not have your back, when that can get them social points with someone else, then, well, sorry, you're not the priority, right? So as a result of that, it was sort of one of those things of like, fine, I'll just be fine on my own. It'll be great. And I had a lot of fun, and it, it worked out well for me, right? That was a dynamic that was very simpatico with my just sort of general way of doing things. So I feel like I don't have much to say on this regard, because even when I would see stuff like this, it would always be the observation kind of a thing, right? But in some ways, I was very okay with being on my own, so I didn't observe too much because I wasn't interested.
Okay, because I can bring up like specific people. I won't use names, obviously, here, but I can bring up specific people with like certain traits that you were able to kind of look at from the outside and go, wow, that's impressive.
Yes.
And you had, at the very least, kind of the, what could I learn from those types of people that you could incorporate, even without the connection aspect?
Right. It was very much something of like, okay, I'm going to maybe study them a bit to try and see what I can do within my own little world. But there was never much desire to, be part of your world.
No. I got you. I got you. Yeah. There were a couple people in my experience that were on, I would say in some ways, I'm going to use Sai actually as an opposite end of the spectrum here with regards to this. Sai has kind of clung to Hachiman at this point here. Sure. And I was kind of sensing this a little bit in the previous episode, but I don't think I really wanted to discuss it too much because I was more thinking about the ways in which Sai was trying to set up the environment so that Hachiman would be accepting of his presence. But given that they brought up the other end of it, and that is what happens when you have like raw charisma and I would say a lot of self-contentment, if that's a way to say it.
Yeah, because that's what's truly charismatic and magnetic, because it's not like being cool or whatever. It's the fact that you don't have to say that you're cool, right? And then everyone just sort of agrees that person's pretty cool, right? Because if you ever have to say like, yeah, I'm cool, no, that's
right. Or if you basically put yourself out there in some ways have a healthier way where you have that little bit of vulnerability. A lot of people don't really see that necessarily as something that is charismatic. Some people do really, I would say, value that, and that's good. I would say there's place for a healthy amount of vulnerability. But Sai's whole thing is basically just, I want to connect with you, so I'm going to lunge and approach and initiate with you until you're basically saying yes, but do it in such a way that is very reserved and like, oh, you know, if it's okay, it's would it be all right?
It's not brash and confident. It's the like, hey, we kind of hung out. You know, you helped me out a bit. I really appreciate that. So, so we're friends, right? Oh, you don't have any guy friends, and you're just assuming that I have a ton of guy friends and thereby don't need to be friends with you because, you know, you'd just be one more, right? Yeah.
But but Hayato has this thing that I've seen with a couple people. Like when I was younger, anyone that could play a musical instrument on some level was instantly like the popular one of the group. And they weren't even trying to really do anything that was like pretty cool. If they were like moderately attractive, could play a musical instrument, and had like, you know, I would say a generally extroverted, gregarious kind of personality with the way they talked and stuff, they were cool and friends, and no one said no to them. And it was just this weird thing that I observed a lot in my younger years. But what I always ended up kind of getting into this weird place was with trying to be friends with them without turning towards some level of animosity towards them. And let me describe what that is that I felt like that they were doing this like consciously. That there was something that they were doing of their choice, I would say specifically, and it was controlling the group in some way. And I really didn't like it because there would be points when I would be like wanting to interact with someone else in the group, and they would do I want to see what so-and-so is doing before I actually do any kind of connection thing with you. So I was like, who cares about them? Like,
so, well, and clearly you must not really care about me that much, right? Because you're more just interested in hanging out with this person, and I'm sort of the tack on. I'm the side dish, you know, the whatever. Yeah.
Right. But I found at other times there would be situations where I really identified how the last episode went into the sports stuff, where Hayato was the one that was really good at tennis. Thus, there were certain things that the other players kind of did to give
deference
essentially to them. And I've been in situations where I was one of the better players in a sport like Ultimate Frisbee, where there would be this deference given, and I didn't know what to do with it. It felt really weird to basically have people agree with me when even I didn't really fully agree with myself. Like, I would be saying something of like, what should we do regarding this thing? Maybe something like this? And I was like, should we do like some kind of discussion surrounding it? And they go, yeah, that sounds good. I'm like, no. I was trying to connect with you guys to discuss around this thing. Can we talk about it? And they'd be like, well, I don't know. I think your idea is pretty good. I'm like, dang it. I'm not trying to push my idea here. I just want to connect with you guys surrounding this thing.
Because there's a danger that comes when, you know, responsibility and individual actions are taken, because then they can fail, right? And then the failure's on you. And there's something very comforting for when you see this person's competent. I don't have to make those scary decisions myself. I can leave it to them, even if it's just in one microcosm or whatever, like, you know, tennis, for instance.
Right.
I can leave this to the person that's better at tennis, and then I'll just sort of, you know, do what they tell me to do. I'll go where they, you know, point for me to go. And then there we go. And that way I can perform well without needing to worry about failure. And if it is failure, well, I did my best, and it's really more their failure, right?
Yeah.
Which even then I think is less likely, because they're really good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I feel like, what's happening with these social hierarchies, where it's that, but it bleeds into other things, right? In a sports setting, that makes a lot of sense, right? You want to win the game. So the best strategy for the game might be to listen to the people that know the most, hence the idea of the coach. But in situations where that's not as clear cut, or when you're wanting to try to connect with the person as an individual, that doesn't necessarily work as well. Hence the whole thing of Hayama's friends being friends with him, but not really friends with each other. And why I love the solution of him removing himself from the group. I was like, in the reaction, I was going to say, I was like, you know, one thing you could do, you know, is just leave, and then they all go together, and there you go. And
and even if they end up splitting up, you know.
Yeah, it's something where it will, at the very least, give them the opportunity to become friends on their own.
Right.
And if they don't, that's fine, but then you see that that's what they decided to do, right? As opposed to them never properly getting the chance because you're always there.
Yeah, and some of the, like, one of the interesting things about this you could draw is that the teacher, Hiratsuka, one of the things that she does is she is not hands-on outside of the teacher's room with regards to Hachiman.
Yeah.
But she is very hands-on in general. So,
Indeed.
you know, all jokes, you know, aside, the fact that she basically turned over Hachiman to Yukino in this regard here, I think is really important here, because Yukino in a lot of ways is also not that hands-on with regards to Hachiman's, you know, overall, I would say, growth and development.
Yeah, if anything, she, like, specifically ignores him.
Yeah, she kind of shows a lot of disinterest and lack of, I would say, you know, empathy towards his situation specifically. Well, because of, in one way, she's a very unique person in that
she is the Ice Queen in general.
She is the Ice Queen. She has a lot of stuff that she's dealt with, and she doesn't like to show that vulnerability to people, and will constantly spit the truth, essentially, or her perception of reality, which she then views as the truth, a la Paladin, you know.
Yep, and there's, you know, there can also be another kind of comfort in that, similar to the whole thing of letting someone else make decisions, because then you don't have to guess what they're actually thinking or feeling about you.
True.
They wear it on their sleeve, there you go.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, even with someone like Yui, who she is a lot closer to, she's still not fully comfortable being vulnerable. She's still kind of that Ice Queen self, because that's where she's found comfort and sort of status quo.
Yeah, and I do feel for Yui, because she is sometimes caught in the middle of these two kind of with their verbal barbs, you know.
And she even
stuff.
mentioned it last episode.
Yeah. But this episode, I feel like we got a really rounded experience with a lot of the characters. I really felt like everyone was utilized quite well. And then the newer characters in Sai, and in some ways Hayama, in that, you know, this is the most
them getting
kind
upgraded.
of focus we've got with him. And them potentially all going with Hachiman to his house, which, who knows, that might not actually happen now, considering that there's, like, potentially a whole class going.
Yeah, that would be...
That might be a bit much.
Okay, that would be a bit much. But as far as a comedy routine...
That would be fun.
Like, for, you know, the snafu that is this romantic comedy.
Yeah.
Having him go from being like, oh yeah, I've got no friends, and his sister, you know, like, talking bits of smack and things like that, to all of a sudden, 24 people show up at my house. That's, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm the loner here. Why are all of you here? Like,
right. I
could
almost,
happen.
Yeah, I almost feel like one of the things that's really, like, kind of focused on this episode, especially with the introduction also of his little sister.
Yeah.
Is that when it comes down to it, there are a couple instances where Hachiman just kind of lets himself get pushed around a bit.
Okay.
And I think his little sister is one of them. He's like,
sure,
they're adorable, but I feel nothing for her.
Right.
Like, that's something that you can look at as, like, it's funny because she is kind of a little menace so far, you know? And, you know, she does say that she cares about him and stuff, and
it's also dispelling that whole little sister anime trope. So it's the I feel nothing for them in that, no, get your mind out of the gutter, people. But also, she is a terror on my existence. Like,
right. It's just another reminder that Hachiman is not your exactly typical, you know, main character, in that he's like, yes, her panties, they are 100% cotton.
Right.
No, we are not going to do typical anime tropes here with this. But then with all the other people in his life, he kind of takes pride in that he doesn't let them kind of tread upon him or something like that. So I almost feel like if a bunch of people came to his house, it would be like him having like 24 of his little sisters in, like, different bodies, just kind of trampling all around him here.
It would either be terrifying in a not funny way or terrifying in a hilarious way.
Exactly.
Where it would be, okay, let's see what happens, or, oh my God, this is a serious violation of personal space and things like that, and I don't know what I'm going to do about this.
Right.
You know, or, okay, all right, let's see what kind of crazy antics come about, you know.
Yeah.
And who knows what that'll end up happening. The teacher will probably be like, no, something more serious, but that would be hilarious if she was like, you know what, actually, all right, I'll let this happen just this once, you know, and he's like, actually, could you change that maybe? Could you veto that, please? I really need to resubmit it.
Right. Also, with the whole thing of the girl that was introduced at the end, I'm really curious what she's, you know, what her next kind of thing in the story is. It's probably just a sci kind of situation where it's like, oh, character that's going to be in the next episode.
Yep.
But there were a couple interactions just throughout the episode with Yui where I could feel Yui kind of doing a little bit of the thing of, hey, I'm willing to take some initiative here with this.
Yeah.
And her being like, yeah, let's exchange numbers here. And I feel like Hachiman every once in a while shows like some really good chops with regards to how he properly understands situations and stuff. And then there are other times where I feel like
he's totally oblivious.
Yeah, it's not exactly that he's totally oblivious, but it's that he's so jaded regarding a specific instance because of something that happened in the past that he can't see it for what it is.
Right, well
he
said.
sees a part of it, but he then interprets it into a completely different thing.
Right, and which is like it almost. This is a weird comparison, in not like weird, but like distant comparison. But this feels very Pride and Prejudice of like Lizzie being like, I'm great at observing people. But it's like, wow, no.
It's like, yes, you are.
Yes, you are. But at the same time, you are both very proud and very prejudiced, while with each of them also being proud and prejudiced. But the point is that you might not be as unbiased of an observer as you might think you are. And that's a cool way to hit on the sort of anime trope of the protagonist not seeing what's right in front of him, but not because he's an idiot.
No,
it's because of past experiences and things like that are so prevalent that are like it's like a dog on a scent, but there's, you know, perfume and stuff everywhere. So it's like there's no way he'll be able to pick up something.
Spinning in circles and he has no idea that he's not actually going anywhere.
While at the same time thinking, I'm seeing so much.
Because okay, this is where I would think that we get both here, is that he's actually 100% right in his deduction regarding Hayato's friends.
Yeah.
And I was even like thinking this was going to be the, oh no, he's wrong, but it's the, oh no, he's actually exactly dead right. But then that's because in some ways this already fits into his worldview in some ways. He's like, there was a social hierarchy kind of system here that was that. But Yui basically saying, hey, it was inconvenient of me to walk around looking for you, so why don't you give me your phone number so it's easier for me to find you? I'm like, wow, Yui, that was some 5-head high IQ, well ideaed, like, you know.
It was a good sort of like taking advantage of the opportunity of, it was convenient and I have been wanting your number, so hey, can you give me your number?
Right, but she even brings up like, I don't want people like questioning what kind of
relationship we have. Right, saying this while blushing and looking away and things like that, doing all of the physical body language that Hachiman comments on later as being the majority of communication, and yet he misses it here. Or at the very least, if he does see it, he certainly doesn't comment on it out loud or in his head.
Yeah, and then a scene that comes after this basically saying that because he's so casual about giving out his phone number, you think, oh, is this something that's like, you know, like something that he's just not aware of? But then he makes it seem like, no, actually, I'm pretty cool. I texted lots of girls in middle school. And she responds in the same way that you'd respond to like someone saying that like someone just died or something.
Right.
And it's like, yo, Yui, are you okay? But it's like this thing of,
it's the comedy and the drama of, you know, I probably have a crush on you. Right. And also, really?
Yeah. But her saying so bluntly, well, I couldn't even imagine you texting a girl. I just want to put out there that I don't think she realizes how potentially hurtful that could be. Just in general. But I think it's also that part of, it's not just like some kind of, oh, I'm jealous that you text other girls or something like that. It's like, oh, wait, like, is this not at all a big deal to you. This is like nothing. You know?
Sure. Yeah.
And then he kind of goes into like puffing himself up of like, yes, when we, exchange numbers and we look at this and we know what's going on. She's just kind of pitying him by giving him her number here. And then, it's like, I was asleep and stuff.
Right.
I just want to say, if you just take this at face value, you just say what it is, you don't try to read into the comedy of it at all. It's basically him just not being aware of the fact that, no, they weren't actually, interested in interacting or texting with you at all.
And it could totally be a sarcasm thing where he's thought about this and he's basically throwing in comedy to diffuse the situation that was potentially tense because of Yui being like, hey, I want your number. And maybe he's totally cluing into it. And he's like, no, I got it. That's fine. I'll come up with a fun story, so that way you can like throw some little ribs in and, and all that stuff and we can have a good yuck, right?
Right. And he is all about that self-deprecation in specific ways to kind of
that has been
protect
firmly
himself.
established.
Yeah. So in some ways, he might be really smart in that he is protecting himself here from getting into the, potentially serious interaction with her regarding the
and also
exchanging of numbers.
And also doing the traditional thing that will cause people, like there's self-deprecating humor, right?
Yeah.
Or there's self-deprecation in general, but then there's more of like gesturing, where it's the I will become the slapstick for you all because that's what I'm familiar with. And this feels like that in a situation where Yui is potentially coming with some honest feelings, right? And he's
he's like, oh no, honest feelings, crap.
Honest feelings,
protect.
I don't know how to deal with that. That's something that sort of goes outside of my usual social hierarchy thing because I'm supposed to be the one at the bottom, and then I give critique commentary on the whole structure of it. So instead, I will bring up something that would normally make any girl think, "Ew, you're gross," which ends up happening with the jokes that they use and all that stuff. And like how much of that is Hachiman's intention versus,
us just perceiving it a certain way.
Right.
And that's why I think this scene is probably one of the most like underappreciated by just like just first viewing. I'm just looking at it and I'm seeing that her response is quite dramatic for the scene. And then also the way in which he like kind of expertly takes control of the conversation's flow, and it almost just feels like something where we got a little bit close to Hachiman's core, a part of who he was, and he, whether by intention or not, like you were talking about, deflected and redirected things and made it into a comedy bit, where I think it'd be very easy to look at it as just a comedy bit, but there might be something more going on. But, I mean, this episode was really good. I really loved the characters overall, so the more stuff we get with them, I kind of like how also in some ways Yukino has a bit faded into the background to give rise for introducing more characters and giving them characterization. But her little tirade about gossipers and stuff like that just felt it felt like a very specific version of me when I was younger. I used to tell people constantly that I would like end friendships just on the idea that if they started just wanting to talk about other people to me. And I realized very quickly how like that's not actually a good thing to just kind of put up as a wall there, because sometimes it is actually kind of tough to have an interaction without talking about other people, because I considered it all gossip.
And also it can be one of those things of like, I feel like you might be going for the low road of gossip. And I won't be a part of that.
I won't be a part of that.
Yeah, sort of potentially imprinting, looking down,
Right. That's I would say the main part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was something that I like really did actively try not to do, because I had been on the negative receiving end in the same way that Yukino had about gossip. So that's one of the areas in which we kind of share some tough experiences in that regard.
Right. And I've never had a negative experience, or rather, hold on. Never a negative.
I know what you're trying to get at.
I have had some really awesome positive experiences of when people started gossiping around, and I brought it up in a way that didn't make them immediately be like, oh, you know, like get pissed at me or whatever. And then later someone else, the person that they were talking about, found out because maybe someone else was listening and not saying anything, and then they mentioned it to them of like, hey, you know,
so and so stood up for you.
So and so stood up for you when you weren't around.
Exactly.
And they were really grateful for that. And that those were really awesome moments. So it's like I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. I feel like we both had like both of those types of experiences, to where when she started talking about that, the reason why we laughed at it was in some ways it was so relatable at points to where we were like, oh yeah, I remember feeling like that. Eradicate them, you know?
Oh, definitely.
But instead it is something to kind of just add to Yukino's characterization, in that she is quite black and white about certain things, which in some ways shows where she needs to grow and maybe learn in some ways from, you know, Hachiman. You know?
One of the things that I really like about how this show is setting up the characters is not just how different the characters are, but because the characters are different, the ways in which they grow will be different from it on a personal level, but also on a story level. So in the case of Yui, right, she's a lot more, you know, straightforward. Well, okay, both her and Yukino are straightforward characters, but because of her particular personality, her development is a lot more sort of slow burn. And I'm sure it will be that way with Yukino as well. But with Yukino, I feel like when it shifts into let's deal with Yukino characterization and growth and things like that, it will be overwhelmingly obvious, right? It will very much steal the spotlight of what's going on because her character takes up a lot of space in that regard. And I think that's why right now she's kind of being relegated to being the commentary character rather than given full focus. So the fact that there's that sort of dynamic approach to the growth of the characters, I really appreciate, because why have one when you can have all of them? So yeah.
And that's where I would say the majority of the discussion is going to come from in this show as a whole. So if we're not talking about specific things like the goofy part where the girl like has the nose blood
obviously
spurt,
it's a three-way,
you know, where she's shipping them all in her head because they're all a bunch of hot boys, you know.
And Yui being like, I'm going to try and do this thing. She does something that's completely unnatural to her. It doesn't work. And the person that we saw as being shallow before is like, hey, you shouldn't gossip. And she's like, shit. And then it gets turned on her of the, oh, you like them, don't you? And all of a sudden, Yui is the one giving info up. Like, it's great.
Yeah. But Hayama Hayato and, Totsuka Saika and Hachiman all as a group, that's gonna be interesting.
That is definitely a trio of some very different people.
Very different people. And then new character tease for next episode. So looking forward to that one. And if you want to see that next episode's reaction and discussion right now, go check out the link in the description below for our Patreon. You can get on early access there. You can watch full-length timer reactions there. And all this comes with Discord access, so you can chat with us in the community there about this show, about anime in general. And you can also talk with Jacob about the sci-fi novel that he wrote.
That's right. Wrote a sci-fi novel called Battle Lines. If you haven't heard of it before, I highly recommend you check it out. It's on Amazon. Links in the description down below.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, we'll see it there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.